I had this new patient last week that was on 16 prescription medication. Only 60 years old. And it really was a head scratcher for me because I had no idea at that point anymore what was real, what was side effects. It was just getting really hard to figure out. And it reminded me of this quote that we found on this guy's t-shirt. And here it is. I take aspirin for the headache caused by the Zyrtec I take for the hay fever. I got from Relenza for the uneasy stomach from the Ritalin I take for the short attention span caused by the Scopoderm. Taken for the motion sickness I got from the Lomotil I take for the diarrhea caused by the Xenical, for the uncontrolled weight gain from the Paxil I take for the anxiety from Zocor I take for my high cholesterol because exercise, a good diet, and regular health care are just too much trouble. It's a good one, right? All right. So, you got the clicker? It's in there? All right. See, I like doing the disappearing act. Kids in crisis. This is a pretty huge topic, and it's a rather overwhelming topic. It's one that's really close to my heart. I'm seeing things in our 25 years of practice here that I never ever would have dreamt seeing. I was lucky enough to have some mentors on whose shoulders I stand today. That gave me a bit of an inkling what the future was going to look like, and they were eerily right on the mark with a lot of their predictions. We are encountering a crisis that is unbelievable. It's a crisis that is almost numbing, and I was thinking of that because I remember my total disbelief when one of my mentors, and this was Dr. Jeffrey Bland, a brilliant PhD in biochemistry, who does some brilliant groundworking research, which we can utilize in this clinic every day. And he made the prediction, this is probably about, I was at a seminar probably about 22 years ago in Detroit, where he was presenting to us functional medicine doctors. And back then, functional medicine was really a ragtag team. You had to have a strong stomach and thick skin because all the bullets were being thrown at you because you were practicing witchcraft. Even though it was totally science-based, popular in Europe at that point, mainstream medicine. Over here, obviously not at all accepted. So here I sat uncomfortably. I think I was the only one that had normal clothes on. Everybody else had the hippie stuff going and the dread bleeds, and so it really was the alternative back then. But I remember the moment that he said, at some point in this generation, you doctors will encounter adult onset diabetes in kids that have just turned teenagers. And I go, no way. I mean, there's absolutely no way. How can that be? That's just totally lifestyle related, and it's from 50 to 60 to 70 years of abusive lifestyle. How can kids possibly get that? Do you know that 1 out of 3 kids is there today? In just a short generation later. I can go on and on the statistics, and they say, yeah, you know, that's happening, and you almost get numbed to it because it's the new normal. Folks, it is not normal. This is an incredible crisis that is going to weigh down this country like nothing else. The federal debt is nothing compared to this. Our potholes that we're encountering right now is nothing. Wish they'd do something about it. So kids in crisis is our topic, and we'd like to start out with our web. We should maybe take these lights off. And the web is something that all of us float in. We are surrounded by our mental, emotional health. Mental and emotional health is something we don't often like to talk about. It's a touchy subject. It's been messed with some strange characters like Freud, and also the very rational people. We have some wonderful counselors that help us that are outside the box looking in, helping us figure out what's going on there. The mental and emotional impact on our genetic expression of health is absolutely immense. We've been able to see that in the animal model, and we've extrapolated that to the human model. And our spiritual well-being, which is really part of the whole spiral, our environmental impact, where we could take different things like a caustic environment from kids living in a household that's undergoing divorce. Then we're into mental emotional again. But again, that's environmental as well. It doesn't have to be just mercury or lead or bad food. Of course, our genetics. How are our genetics expressed? And genetics, I just want to spend a very brief moment on. Genetics does not determine all of our health at all. We are not hijacked by our genetics, folks. It is genetic expression which is what affects us. All of us in this room here have genes that can play out a story of horror or a fairy tale of good health, depending what music you play to it. If you play good music, good lifestyle, anti-inflammatory foods, good emotions, strong spiritual health, if you play that kind of music to your genes, your epigenes, which are the little control units, your on-off buttons on the gene itself, will be saying, hey, bad gene, quiet down, good genes, come on up. And it's something that we have seen time and again. We can demonstrate it in radionucleotide studies. It is absolutely amazing what you can do from minute to minute with genetic expression. And this holds true in, you know that I like to use the Native Americans because I think it's such a sad story. But Native Americans have been studied, and 150 years ago they were tall, healthy, really lithe, athletic, were not subject to disease until they were introduced to our lifestyle, which has reduced their lifespan in half. More than half of them are diabetic. They are living in such a life of despair that the suicide rate is absolutely astonishing. And these are people that have exactly the same genes as they did 150 years ago, yet they're being expressed differently, aren't they? Australia did a great study about 2.5, 3 years ago that they put some of them back into their ancestral homes and made them hunt and just did all the things they do. And you know what? A lot of their disease markers reversed themselves totally in just 7 weeks. I thought that was so encouraging to see. In just 7 weeks, they were all hitting the yes buttons, the on buttons for the good genes, and look what can happen. And we see that in this office as well. When we undergo lifestyle changes, how even basic stuff like cholesterol makes a dramatic turnaround in just 2 or 3 weeks. It doesn't take much. So genetics is not something that hijacks us. But all that stuff just has a huge impact on our GI system, our detoxification pathways, on our hormones, on our lymphatic and immune system, and our neurological system and depression, and they all interact with each other. I can go on and on, but for example, the gut we call the second brain, so it cross-communicates with the mood system there. And if your gut is off, it's thrown toxins into your system which crosses the blood-brain barrier and yes, can cause depression, bipolar, seizures, ADHD. See, everything is connected, and that's where we have gone wrong in our healthcare system, because we have these wonderful, well-meaning, brilliant doctors that specialize in just one component of us and then lose sight of how it has an effect on it all. Do we need a specialist? Of course. But we need them not for our overall healthcare, but for just how does this piece fit better into the puzzle? And that's where the ball gets dropped. Thus, our web of health. And everything we talk about today fits into this web of health. So we'll start with childhood obesity. 1 out of 3 kids now has an issue with weight. And by the way, the last official data that I could find, but I've got all the quotes. These are all the quotes are going to be at the bottom of the slide if you're interested. They're from medical peer-reviewed journals, meaning they're the top-tier medical journals. These are mainstream medicine journals that everybody reads throughout the world. So this is information that you can go back to and research further if you like. 1 out of 3 kids now has a weight issue, and the latest statistic was from 2009 that I got. So it's a little bit dated. There's no newer data. I suspect it's gotten a little bit worse than that. Because 70% of kids 2 to 19 are obese. I suspect it's closer to 20% today. And the first generation to die before our parents, in other words, their lifespan is not as long as our current generations. And that we think in modern history is the first time to happen, excepting World War I and World War II, some catastrophic wars, especially World War I, which took the life expectancy down of a generation. But it just doesn't happen. And here we are going the wrong way. And here we were fed this thing forever. Well, look at the life expectancy 150 to 200 years ago. Life expectancy was in the 40s. Well, it wasn't. It really was not in the 40s, because infant mortality is what artificially took that down. And if you take the first 5 years of statistics away from this area and now count them, the life expectancy was actually longer than ours. And even if our life expectancy was longer, are we truly healthier? Is that how we measure health, life expectancy? I don't think so, because look at the last 30 years of life of most of us. It's just this general, this gradual descent where more and more medication gets added and we get just a debilitated, non-functional life. So it starts the first year of life already. And with obesity, if you are going on a trend of being obese before age 10, more than 90% of them by age 50 are still morbidly obese. So in other words, one step above it. Which cuts life expectancy. This is a Dutch study that was released about a year and a half ago. Cuts life expectancy by between 12 and 16 years. And not only that, but it cuts the functionality of your life, doesn't it? So obesity among children has tripled. And some of the causes of that is just plain poor nutrition. Here we are just surrounded by food, but it's empty food. It's food that causes inflammation. It's food that causes a heightened release of insulin. It's food that kills us. The portion sizes that we are now have grown accustomed to, and we all have seen the pictures, I'm sure, of the new normal pop size you get at McDonald's, which is this high, versus in the 1950s, which was this high. We have more than quadrupled pop sizes just per serving. The things we get on a plate, I am continuously astonished by it. And it's a really nice little reset button that I have the fortune of having my family in the Netherlands that I go back to visit, as well as do my seminars and some of the research. And I'm reminded every time I go back, okay, my reset button, this is a normal portion size. If you get a cookie, for instance, I'm just choosing a cookie with tea, that's very traditional, and it's a traditional country, so 10 o'clock is tea time. And you might get this little wafer of a cookie, and that's it. Over here, they would laugh at that. They would absolutely laugh at that. So I would say, if I compare what Americans eat versus what the Dutch eat, I have my feet in both countries, I'd say we eat close to, I wouldn't say double, but close to double that what the Dutch people do. Yeah, I do. The average, I did a statistical analysis on the weight, and we on average weigh 29 pounds more than they do, even though they are on average 3 inches taller than we are. So there's a big difference. So 80% of youth drinks sugary drinks daily. Vitamin D levels is epidemically low. Vitamin E levels is low in toddlers, 91% of preschoolers. See what I mean about nutritional deficiencies? Our RDA is not cutting it, is it? So when you see 100% of RDA in your cereal box, folks, it's synthetic vitamins which can't be absorbed, and it's not enough to really maintain health for this day and age. Those RDAs were established oftentimes in the 30s and 40s, and oftentimes on studies of only 3 to 7 individuals. It is just such complete bunk. So it's not even coming close to meeting the needs of our generation. And the lack of breastfeeding support. We only have 13% of our kids are exclusively breastfed for 6 months, which is considered the bare minimum in the entire world. Okay, so lack of daily exercise, and I feel like a little old fogey when I say this, because I heard my parents complain about, oh, well, you know, you kids don't know how to play, and when I was young I only had 1 ball to play, you know, the whole story. And you have so many toys and that I mean never had, and yeah. But I really think that today versus a generation or 2 or 3 generations ago, a lot less time gets spent playing, because we have the video screens, we have the computer screens, we have, TV, obviously, and 7.5 hours per day spent on that screen is unbelievable to me. It is absolutely unbelievable to me. The lack of daily exercise is critical. Toxins. BPA we have some very powerful studies that now on BPA that show it is definitely one of the causes of obesity. It's not just lack of exercise or D or E or too much sugary drinks. BPA and chemicals also have a major influence on metabolism, how our hormones operate, including insulin, estrogen, and testosterone. And maybe behind one of the epidemics in the current generation, that overall fertility now in males is down by 70%, 70. And toxicity is pretty huge. So almost anybody that comes in with a weight problem, we do some sort of detoxification because we know that's partially behind it. Yeah. So we're going to address questions after, if that's okay. That BPA is the plastic liner inside aluminum cans. It's part of plastic that makes plastic moldable. So it is found in, I would say 90% of plastic products. It is found in the air because of it, because even if you go into your car, there's some BPA being excreted there. The glasses that you're wearing, for instance, if there's plastic along the rim, there's BPA in that actually can go into your bloodstream. And I've seen the studies where somebody tried to get their BPA levels as low as the Mennonites because they have very low BPA because they don't have modern products in their home. And they could not get it down until they removed their glasses. So if we're being exposed left and right to these chemicals that just affect us in ways that we don't even think about, that we just accept. And all these modern day chemicals, there's no way we can test them long term because there's just too many of them. More than 10,000 chemicals get released into our marketplace per year. There is only 3% of them get tested. See, so we're just exposed to this incredible load that now is, we tested for chemicals in umbilical cord. You know, I think that number is probably incredibly low. We don't know how to test for all the chemicals yet. But 287 toxic chemicals are found in umbilical cord worldwide. Worldwide. Nobody's immune anymore. And 217 of them are known to be toxic to the brain and nervous system. So you know where I'm going to go with that right away.
The FDA is far enough to take BPA out of baby bottles.
Yes, that's a good point. BPA, the FDA actually did something. And here it is. They took it out of the bottles for babies and the baby food cans, and they're trying to expand it to Canada is actually a bunch of steps ahead of us on that one. So the consequences is really adulthoods, the heart disease, the cancers. We've now been able to link it directly to that. The increased risk of impaired glucose tolerance. 1/3 of U.S. children in 2000 have risk of diabetes. Now, see, this is a 13-year-old statistic. So you can imagine where that statistic is now. And I am seeing that. We are checking for cholesterol, sugar levels in triglycerides in our kids. And we are seeing some astonishing things here at DBC with kids that seemingly look normal, but they are not. They are pre-diabetic. Okay, so 13-year-old, Dr. Stacy had a 13-year-old today, and triglycerides was 289. So we're talking way into the diabetes kind of a territory, and yeah. So pretty astonishing what we're seeing. And I mentioned the BPA, but also pesticides. We have definitely linked pesticides now to the phenomenal rise in diabetes. Because in Vietnam and Cambodia, as you have, those of you that come to some of my other seminars, they have an absolute diabetes epidemic on their hands right now, worse than ours. Even though they're skinny, they work hard, they have the same lifestyle as 200 years ago, they live in small villages, work the land, eat the same food. Yet all of a sudden in the last 40 years, their diabetes is on an incredible ramp up. They figured it out 3 years ago that it was Agent Orange. The legacy we left behind there, it is in the groundwater, which they water their crops with. It is a pesticide and herbicide, which is now affecting their insulin receptors in very trace quantities, mind you, but it's causing diabetes. So yes, it does affect us. Do not be fooled by quantity. This stuff is potent. So it puts us, obesity puts a great risk of social and psychological problems, and it has a profound impact on mental health. It's not only about self-image, but it's also the toxicity of fat and inflammatory response that gives to the body 24/7 that eventually starts wearing down brain power. Breathing problems. There's 59% higher risk of food allergies for obesity and joint problems, and you can see that autoimmune diseases, because of all this inflammation, is just through the roof with childhood obesity. Our healthcare system cannot support a load like this. 50% of all kids today, so we're talking 13 and younger, have chronic disease. So that means we can go to the mall. Half the kids there are sick with something. It does affect our school performance. Brain development, seizures, sleep problems. I get asked so often, little Johnny can't sleep, what do we do? We get asked that question so often. And what is that a sign of? It's a sign of an inflamed, agitated, toxic brain. That's what that is. And because of that, childhood learning disabilities are through the roof. Let me backtrack just on obesity, because what I did is said, instead of leaving you hanging with some of this startling data, what are the action steps that we do? So this is an add-on here's some of the action steps on obesity that Dr. Stacy and I and our incredible team that we have working here have put into play for these patients. First of all, we demand no pop. The sugar in pop is startlingly high. Dawn, how high is it? Do you know? 10 teaspoons? It's about 10 teaspoons of sugar, which is this much of the can is just pure sugar. And a lot of these pops, as you now know, is corn syrup. And we think as an obesogen, corn syrup is about 5 times as bad as sugar. Do not believe those new ads the corn industry has put out that corn syrup is natural. If you saw the process that you go through to make corn syrup, there's nothing natural about it. In fact, I dare say that plastic might be more natural than corn syrup. I truly mean that, because it is made from tar that comes right from earth, and there's fewer steps to make plastic than there is to make corn syrup. So, we also like to severely limit the fruit juices simply because of the sugar. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good for you. We get that a lot. But doc, it's natural. Well, yeah, so is marijuana. It doesn't mean it's good for you. Yeah? So make sure they have the appropriate multiple vitamins and vitamin Ds, because you saw the nutritional deficiencies. We make sure that they are very absorbable, because they often have absorption problems. The synthetic vitamins, like you would pick up at a grocery store, would actually hurt them more than it helps them. And we check cholesterol, just like Dr. Stacy did today. We check their sugar levels. We check the urine for heavy metals, because heavy metals, that toxicity is an obesogen. We also demand, this is mandatory, outside time with strict time limits on screen time. So this is a really important one, folks. It's got to be outside air. This is different than, say, playing somewhere in a gym, which is great. Social connectedness and exercise, I don't want to take away from that too. Shooting hoops in a gym is awesome, but you got to be outside. There's something about outside light and air that has a stimulant for losing weight that inside time does not. And that's why whenever I can, I urge patients to exercise outside, except not when there's all ice and, So we also have probiotics. We know that if you give a digestive enzyme with probiotics, that alone can result, on average, 25 pounds lost in 1 year with no other dietary changes. Just getting the gut to function a little bit better. 25 pounds, folks. So those are some of the things that we do. Chronic disease is a pretty broad, big category that I'll talk about at the end as far as action steps go. So let's forward that into the childhood learning disabilities. It's now 1 out of 6. And developmental disabilities are huge. And between 97 and 2008, there was a 17% increase of kids with developmental disabilities. You know, when I first was in practice, and I started noticing all these people, these kids on Ritalin and all these other mood-altering psychotropic drugs, I thought, is this increase really because of overdiagnosing, where we're we diagnose them quicker than we used to? And you know, there might be some of that. There might be some of that. But I have 5 kids. Oldest one is 28, the youngest one is 11. So I've been through a few classrooms. I've had a few meetings with students, and yes, I've taken a lot of these classes on, you don't have no idea how many museums I've been through. And maybe you do. And the same one over and over. So I've been watching these kids, and truly a lot of them do have real problems. They're truly agitated. You can see that their brains are on fire. It's not normal high energy. That's different. That's smoother. Yes, it might be irritating, but it's smoother. There's this agitation. There's something else going on. And I think most teachers will tell you that something is broken in these kids' brains, and we can make them function, but really, really difficult. So there's definitely a problem with today's brain. And premature births has become a real issue. That's part of the issue right now. It's become real common. The neurochemical imbalances due to the toxicity of our environment and our food chain, and errors in brain development. And that one is a big one, because what happens in utero stays with us for life. So everyone who is pregnant really holds a lock to the key of health of many, many, many generations. And yes, you males, you do as well. Let's say you as a father are alcoholic, and you now have 4 children while you were an alcoholic. Did you know that you, for the next 5 generations, have caused a zinc deficiency in all those people being born the years that you won't even meet, just by alcohol abuse? That's just one little example. We can make a profound difference by our health for the future generation, because 20% of your toxins, and now I'm talking to the moms, gets dumped into the baby. So let's say you have heavy metals. 20% of that gets dumped into that little body. They will carry that with them for the rest of life. Does that affect their neurodevelopment? You better believe it. Does it affect your detoxification pathways? Yes. Does that increase the chances of developing diabetes? Yes. And that's why we are such sticklers with women when they're going through that process, and with men with their overall health habits. So we have a lot of issues that is causing these ADHD. So it really isn't just about bad parenting. Yes, parenting makes an awful lot of difference. We all know that. That's the law of reasonableness. That's common sense. But our environment is really a problem. We like to really load up our pregnant patients with lots of GLA oil, a precursor of folic acid. We give them lots of good clean fish oils and plant-based vitamins that are way beyond the normal prenatals to make sure that none of that stuff gets passed on that could be passed on. All right. So for ADHD, your action steps would be explore different teaching methods. Okay, these brains operate differently, and I myself was considered one of those kind of kids. Probably still am, and I was forced to make math happen. I was having a lot of problems with math. And an unbelievable amount of energy was put into me, and I was very fortunate that I was explained this way and explained that way and explained that way. But it wasn't until a little bit later in life that I finally figured out, hey, I can really learn well when I'm doing stupid things, like bouncing around or listening to music while bouncing on a ball, and just making sure that it seems like it just made things happen. And when I figured that out, all of a sudden things started clicking a lot quicker. There are now learning centers that do this type of thing. Yeah, it's And they have trampolines, and yes, some kids are bouncing on a trampoline while they're learning math facts. Here's the teacher and there's the student. And it is absolutely amazing once we can figure out how the brain learns best. If we can figure that out, we can get them through this. So it's something that if we had another life here, I would love to do something like that, but obviously that's a whole devotion, it's a whole other field. But it's amazing what can be accomplished with just that. So that's one of the action steps. With ADHD, we also do a lot of fats. So we like to go with DHA oil especially, gamma-linolenic acid. We like to eliminate allergens, so we often do a food sensitivity test, and very often you'll find that there is a food that is really irritating them, and it's amazing just taking that away what that can do. So put them on a low inflammatory food diet. And there's a couple of supplements I really want to know about. I want this to be more about lifestyle, but this is a must-do. They tend to be very low in B vitamins. So there's a combination of herbs we get from Switzerland called Biostrath, which is specifically for ADD. And on average, a D student becomes a C student, and a C student becomes a B student. And we also give them probiotics to make sure their gut works well, because the gut is the second brain. So did you kind of get that? I kind of ran through that, but we have a lot to go through. When I started practice, 1 in 22,000 kids was diagnosed as autistic. We had the same markers back then as we do now for diagnosis. So this is not a case of better diagnosis. We have a phenomenal epidemic, and it's changing from year to year to year. Was I standing here 2 years ago in front of you? Yes. Then I was quoting 1 in 123. Now I'm stating 1 in 88, and in boys, 1 in 54. New big study in New Jersey. This is mind-boggling. Autistic diseases that we see so much of is absolutely on a runaway course, and it seems like nobody can figure it out. Prenatal inflammation is the only thing that we know for sure is definite. In a Finland study, it showed a 43% elevated risk of markers with inflammatory markers. I really dug into this one. I went over and over the study because it had so many confusing aspects to it. It's a pretty recent study. And it was really fascinating because it also showed amount of gluten a mom ate, and there are so many other factors. This is just an average, is 43%. But if a mom was Finnish, did not take vitamin D, and was obese, the elevated risk was more than fourfold. So there's a lot of things that are being hidden in this study. Again, mom's health seemed to have made a big difference. Males, unfortunately, were not studied. I would have loved to have seen that as part of that. Pollution. A California study showed children with autism more likely to live in high pollution areas this first year of life. Now, the high pollution area, by the way, was busy traffic crossings. So right next to where there's a stoplight, and where cars have to stop and go all the time, houses right around that area showed a significant more higher incidence of autism. Interesting, isn't it? And then we in this office have also noted, and there's study after study shown that there's not one autistic kid out there that has normal gut. Their intestines, every one of them, to the man and woman, has gut issues. We do a stool analysis automatically on each of them and find huge amounts of abnormalities. So in my 25 years of practice and in Dr. Stacy's practice here, I don't think we've ever found a normal gut in anybody that's autistic. So that obviously is where the rubber hits the road. So you must do a stool analysis. We do heavy metal analysis. I would say 9 times out of 10 there's heavy metals because they can't detoxify well. We throw them into what we call the 4R program. And the 4R program basically means remove toxins, re-inoculate, re-establish normal enzymes, and so forth. The 4R program is basically a way of detoxification and re-establishing normal gut function. We give them copious amounts of folic acid and B12. We've now established that schizophrenia and autism, there might be a relationship between them. And Dr. Hoffer in the 1950s did some research on this and found that copious amounts of B12 and folic acid can actually help these people a lot. So it's something that we do. We teach the anti-inflammatory lifestyle through our health coaches. And we basically try to lessen the burden on detoxification pathways. We optimize in utero conditions. I'll close today. I'm not done yet. Stay seated. I will close today in a bit with one of the stories of one of our autistic patients. So don't let me forget that. That's a good one. So I think I got myself mixed up with the ADHD and learning disabilities. But here it is. The ADHD is 1 in 10 kids has ADHD. 22% increase. Environmental factors are mercury, food additives, and gluten. And the food additives are these. We have food colors in this country laced through our entire food chain. It's hard to escape it. And folks, they are illegal in Europe. They are illegal in Europe because they are considered neurotoxic, linked to seizures, tumors, and behavioral disorders. So food additives, especially food colors, no go. Absolutely no go. And I've seen that personally even with my kids. I can always tell with some of my kids when they have had exposure to food colors, pupil shrinks, their behavior becomes more criminal-like, and they are just agitated. They were agitated. Luckily, they've now learned for themselves, okay, avoid that stuff. This stuff is poison. It does not pass muster in the rest of the world. Why should we eat it? Do not poison your kids. No food colors. No artificial preservatives. And please, no artificial sweeteners. These artificial sweeteners and MSG are neurotoxic. It is amazing the amount of behavior change we see just by removing those. What's that? Yeah, every prescription has them as well. So these food colors, it's amazing. You want a little amoxicillin? Well, it's pink, right? And who knows what sweeteners in there? I have no idea. So yeah, these food additives are. I think some of the side effects from medications is not the medications, but the food additives that are in there. Yeah. So and gluten. Gluten is one of the top causes of ADHD. It is next month's seminar. It's a gluten update from 2 years ago. We're going to have some phenomenal research that's being presented that we're linking it from anything to anorexia to all kinds of brain disorders that you've never even dreamt of. So gluten is on a runaway train as far as sensitivities. I just had a patient of mine who is going to medical school here at Loyola, Chicago, one of our top medical schools, and I said, so how's your nutrition classes? Expecting, says, I'm not getting any. Well, he is. He's got a nutrition class. That's a first, by the way. Most schools do not teach nutrition, really, for the most part. But he says, Doc, this one is pretty interesting. It goes into biochemistry, and says, so what are you being taught? He says, you're gonna like this. Basically, they're teaching us at Loyola that all forms of gluten is inflammatory for everybody. I about sank through the floor. So yes, gluten is obviously tolerated better by some people than others. But it really has gone through profound changes in the last 100 years. I so remember a long time ago, we're talking, I'm not going to say how long ago, but this was in the 1960s, that I would look, as a kid I was overlooking the grain fields behind our house. This is in the Netherlands. And we could see grain fields as long as we could go, and I loved walking and running through that, which I probably wasn't supposed to. And the grain fields, I would love that because it would close up above you. It was just so in memory that those were long. They was probably about this high. Today's grains, today's wheat is this high, short, stocky, resistant to blowing over, rain, hail, and all those things. And that change came about 50 years ago. That change made it a lot different, a lot more inflammatory, along with the overload of gluten in everything. It's become a staple. Along with our processing, it has all of a sudden changed our reaction to it. Add to that, poor guts as a whole, And we now have become reactive as a race. It's really sad, because in the Bible it was called the staff of life. It was really one of the ultimate foods, but we've messed with it. So gluten is one of the things that we experiment with over there. ADHD, you also must do heavy metal analysis. We give lots of oil, so this could be avocados, lots of olive oil. As far as supplementation, we use DHA. The brain craves it, has a real calming effect. Even in babies, it has a real calming effect. And I just heard from one of my patients who had some issues getting through college, just was thinking, I'm not going to make this. So I put him on NeuroFocus, which is some B vitamins with some plant-based oils and fish oils. It's for ADHD. It's called NeuroFocus. It pushed him through this really good school. He now is in chiropractic school, and he will be graduating this fall. I just absolutely love it. Last time I said, "Are you still taking NeuroFocus?" Yeah. So he it was really rewarding to see somebody that was going to drop out now graduating as a physician, hopefully this year. Okay, so asthma. Asthma is not to be underestimated. If somebody comes in with asthma, you're talking an autoimmune disease. It's the same thing as eczema. It's basically the same thing. Eczema, psoriasis, asthma, they're all in the same kind of antibody reaction. And people who outgrow their asthma, folks, they did not outgrow it. They're just on the path towards changing gears towards another autoimmune disease later on in life. So asthma, 1 in 10 of the kids has it now. And this is a very new finding that it was first discovered in England that asthmatics are very low in vitamin A. I thought, isn't that interesting? Because a newer finding yet, which was published just a little bit ago, out of England also, shows that vitamin A deficiency affects gut flora the most, as well as liver detoxification pathways. Gut flora, that's 70% of the immune system. Liver, obviously detoxification. All of a sudden our immune system is really, really reactive because we don't have a big part of our immune system, and that's how it's connected. Secondhand smoke. Non-smoking populations in Utah compared to the rest of USA, there's a big difference in those numbers. And the consequences is, besides just for the here and now, is long-term autoimmune risk. So these asthmatics, what do we do? Well, obviously you give them vitamin A of some sort that is 100% plant-based. Here's the difference between synthetic vitamin A, like it's often found in multiple vitamins, versus plant-based vitamin A. There's over 150 subtypes of vitamin A out in nature. So a carrot is composed of about 150 subtypes of vitamin A. Synthetic vitamin A is only one of the 150. It doesn't have all the cofactors with it. So if you supplement yourself with that, all of a sudden the body says, okay, I got one of the 150, what about the 149 others, folks? It starts pulling the 149 others out of your body tissues and combining it with that synthetic vitamin A to make it whole. So this pulling out of vitamin A out of these body tissues, that is your vitamin A toxicity sign and symptoms. It really is a deficiency sign and symptoms. So this vitamin A toxicity that everybody always hears about, it's not toxicity. It's this process occurring. If you can give the patient this whole carrot instead, all of a sudden you don't have to fear that toxicity unless you go crazy high. That's why in Europe they don't blink at giving you 40 to 50,000 units of vitamin A, and here anything over 10,000 you have to put this big black box warning label that it might kill you. Seriously. The most common thing for the common cold in Europe to give you is 40,000 units of vitamin D and between 50 and 100,000 units of vitamin A. Gives you this immediate immune rise, and they don't fear this stuff because by law it has to be 100% plant-based. Does that make sense? So that can make a pretty significant impact on, oh, by the way, that's short-term doses. Just so you know. We also make them dairy-free because the reactivity to dairy and asthma was long ago established. Long ago established. So a high percentage of them are very dairy sensitive. We give them vitamin D because of its immune modulating effects. We also try to kill yeast. Very often there's an imbalance of good bugs versus bad bugs. And I like using a coconut extract that's very concentrated. It's called lauricidin. And by accident I stumbled on this, and this is not research, this is just clinical findings right within DBC. This stuff that kills yeast seems to have a great impact on breathing, and it makes sense when you think about it. Reestablish normalcy in the gut, you reestablish normal reactivity to the immune system, which makes you less reactive to the environment. And as Dr. Stacy will also tell you, as well as my own experience, if you adjust an asthmatic, that can have a profound effect, because an adjustment in the upper back right through here, those are the nerves going to the bronchial tubes. It can have an almost immediate relaxing effect if you can relax that nerve, take the pressure off, and that can then increase air filling. Something we can demonstrate with peak flow meters here with before and after adjustment. Usually there's at least a 25% improvement immediately after an adjustment. Study was done right here in Michigan. It was a 1-year study on asthmatics that showed that with adjustments alone, you can see about a 60 to 70% improvement in overall breathing capacity. So that's very significant, and it was a well done study. So, seizures. You guys with me yet? We're good? Okay. Seizures, very common. It's very common. High fever is one of the main causes. Those are not as worrisome, even though it's scary to watch, obviously, first time this happens. We often get these calls. But metabolic disorders, we right away, if a kid has had a seizure, you have to do some basic blood work, figure out metabolic disorder, yes, no. And also question closely on drugs, toxins, meds. And if there's already any kind of brain issue, seizure risk is way higher. It's almost always associated with some sort of learning difficulties, and it's obviously a brain on fire. There's a brain shorting out, having difficulties. And seizures are taken very seriously because I have seen them degenerate into behavioral disorders like bipolar disorders. We act on them. We always eliminate gluten as an experiment. As you'll hear next month when you come to the gluten seminar, you can get about a 60% improvement in seizure incidence by going gluten-free alone. So it's a phenomenal step that you can take. So it's a critical one. So we do that. When you do it, you have to do it right, you have to do it completely, and you do it for at least a couple months. You focus on lots of oils again for the brain. And you check for heavy metals, because heavy metals and seizures do go together. And you got to remember, the gut is the second brain. So whatever happens in there happens to the brain. Get rid of neurotoxic compounds, the ones I spoke about. That could be certain foods that you're sensitive to. It could be the fact that you have a yeast or other bacterial overgrowth, a nasty overgrowth of some kind, which is then, this is a very recent study out of Belgium. If you have abnormal gut bacteria, you will have abnormal metabolism of fats, which creates these weird byproducts, which goes into the bloodstream, easily goes across the blood-brain barrier, and causes inflammation up there. You're literally dumping pollution, putrefied fats, into your brain, which of course responds like mad. We had a patient that we did a report of findings on this morning, and was a C-section. So we're talking no good bugs from mom was passed on if you have a C-section, because going through the birth canal gives you the good bugs. Born in a hospital, so there's a 50% chance of what we call a nosocomial infection, and that's just a fancy word for a bacteria introduced in the hospital into the gut. So there's that. Then traveled through Africa the first 10 years of life. So who knows what we were exposed to over there. And then was, by the age of 22, she says she doesn't remember exactly, but between 8 and 10 medications to control symptoms, ranging anywhere from brain issues to hormonal issues to arthritic pains and all kinds of autoimmune kind of inflammation. Learned how to wean herself off of these meds and go vegan to try to detoxify, and comes to me with all kinds of hormonal issues and really inflammatory issues, and I was quite shocked she was doing as well as she was. You think that gut is on fire? Yeah. Every time that she has a kale salad, it's not going to benefit her nearly as much as it would me. With me, when you get complete breakdown, you can pull the nutrients out. It goes into your detoxification pathways. It just ramps up all the tissues as far as good genetic expression, hitting the off buttons on all the bad genes, right? Whereas in an individual like that, they're sitting there fermenting, rotting it, putrefying it, and then, yeah, I was able to, I'm certain, you know, it's way better than a Twinkie. I mean, come on. But at the same sense, you're not getting the benefits out of it because you're not completely able to break down. And what you do break down, some of it might putrefy, and that creates that toxicity from within. And that toxicity from within is obviously, wherever your weaknesses is, that's where it goes. Okay. So, with chronic disease, which hits 50% of the kids, how do you treat them? So really, we go back to the web again. What's affecting what? Because most of the time, every single one of those elements within the web is involved to some degree. So what can we play with that makes the most sense? And it hardly ever makes sense to play with all of them because that totally will overwhelm anybody. So we tried to bring out some key aspects, what is most important for them, and I hope that God's creation will then just take and run with it while we're just kind of watching it happen. So instead of hijacking the system with a powerful drug, managing the symptom, because that's really what it is, symptom management, and creating ill health and shutting our eyes to really what's happening, let's take away the boulder that's in the way of proper health and watch the body do what it's supposed to do. So you look at the whole web and you try to provide the nutrients that the patient is, one, either is malabsorption or not getting, or they just genetically need more. For example, I mentioned schizophrenia earlier. Did you know that you need, from some B vitamins, 10,000 times the RDA of some of those B vitamins in order to cure that condition? 10,000 times the RDA, and then they operate normally. So yeah, you have to really ignore the RDAs and go to what the patient truly needs. And exercise is a huge component in getting kids well. I'm always shocked by kicking them outside. What happens? Minimum of half-hour a day, rain, shine, whatever. Get out there. It is critical. Green space. This was a study on ADHD. Seems to make a bigger difference than concrete space, but any outside air and light is good. Green space better. So that is a must-do for any kid at any age. Stress management. Make sure that home environment is conducive to that. Unfortunately, kids have to have outlets for stress. Again, the outside time is best, but if they're growing up in a toxic environment or there's a toxic environment in school, amazing what an effect that can have on development. Dr. Lupian from McGill University did some groundbreaking work on this about a decade ago, and she found that stressed kids, it really affects the adrenal development, and that affects hormone development, and that legacy is then passed on to the next generation, which triggers something in the brain and makes that generation much more criminal, much more prone to become criminal. And this is the cycle that's going on in our ghettos. It goes on and on. He says, well, you know, what's with these people? They're all in jail, and it's like and some people say, well, it's because they didn't have this or that. You know, it's not only from poverty alone. It's from the fact that mom was stressed, passing on stress hormones from her adrenals, affecting brain development in the next generation, and the cycle repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself. So, sleep. We need our most sleep from 0 to 5 and 14 through 18, right when they don't get it. And that is because there's a lot of hormone changes and a lot of growth occurring during those years. And sleep has to be a minimum of 9 to 11 hours a night. That is minimum. And it is an absolutely critical factor for detoxifying, because most of the detoxification occurs when we sleep, and it's absolutely critical for brain development. 9 to 11 hours. I remember moving here and said, well, this is kind of cool. The stores are open here at night. I'm going to kind of grocery shop at night. It's kind of weird, but I got to do this. So I know it's normal, but it's not. And because I come from a place, everybody shuts down at 5 o'clock. That's it, folks. And there's a few gas stations open, and that's really about it. And so I go shopping at night, and I said, well, how late can I push this? 10 o'clock, they're still open. Okay, so you're in the grocery, Meyer, right here, up the East Beltline, 9, 10 o'clock, you show up there. I can't believe all the kids that are running around there at that time of the day. It is unbelievable. These kids needed to be in bed at 7:30 or 8. I know I sound old-fashioned, but it is the truth. They need to get to sleep. And there's no way they can develop to be healthy young adults running around Meyer at 10 o'clock at night. So, sunlight. Something happens to neurodevelopment when sunlight and even cloudy daylight hits the retina. We haven't figured out what it is. It may even have something to do with UV hitting the skin. We don't know, but some profound hormone changes occurs, especially for the nervous system, when we get light entering the retina and hitting our skin. So sunlight, yes, critical. And supplement, however, is appropriate. And how do you know what's appropriate? Well, we're all oil deficient, it seems. Get those oils in these kids. We're all vitamin D deficient in the winter. It seems like all of us can use probiotics. And I suspect if I truly tested every patient of mine, 15 years or younger, not one would not have at least one or many nutritional deficiencies. Our food chain is so depraved at this time that, again, that's a whole other ecological seminar, but we're just, even when eating organic, we figure when we eat organic today, it has maybe 1/3 the nutrients in it that it did 100 years ago. So there's some interesting things happening to our food supply. So look at us as a web. The one thing affects the other. And it has this effect. If a patient has a headache, that does not mean a Tylenol deficiency. Yeah? It does not. There's a reason for that headache to be there. And you gotta figure it out, because it's not normal to have a headache. It is not. Tylenol, by the way, is illegal in my home country for kids. It really messes up the detoxification pathways. Can't do it. It's dangerous stuff. Gets treated as candy. Gluten, this is our research update for next time. And I can tell you an interesting story about gluten. And this is that autistic story that I'm going to tell you about. So a patient presents to our office from Indiana and has increasing autistic spectrum disorder. Started as Asperger's, and then finally into high school now is full-blown autism and cannot no longer attend school. So I thought, well, that's interesting. It keeps on progressing. So what's going on here? So we did a full workup. There was a heavy metal toxicity, mercury, which then led us to do a stool analysis. The gut, like all of them, very, very affected. We put him on a gluten-free diet, dairy-free diet. We did hit the detoxification pathways, and lots of oils. The B vitamins I threw Adam was exceedingly high, and really worked intensely with him for about a year, and he returned to school with virtually no symptoms. So here's a successful autism story that was able to turn a corner just in time, because honestly, when at 15 it becomes pretty dicey, because a lot of things are set in stone at that point. But this one, we were very fortunate and blessed enough to be able to turn that one around. So because of the long distance, I started seeing less and less, and then didn't see him for a while. And then at 18, I get the call that he was coming in again. So I said, I'd love to check on this one. And wouldn't you know it, full-blown autism. Full-blown. I think maybe even worse. So I asked Mom what happened there. And she says, well, twofold. One, he snitched on his gluten. Says, okay. Says, we noticed some behavioral issues just with that. It wasn't it. Says, but then he got accepted to college, and they wanted to give him the vaccine to prevent meningitis. Gave him the vaccine, next day, full-blown autism symptoms. Next day. We have a patient here who has a similar case. It's going to court, and a neurologist is actually testifying in favor of this patient. That yes, we saw this dramatic change with this one vaccination. Is this common? No, it's not common. But it just demonstrates the toxicity of our environment. Does that make sense? Because obviously there's toxins within the vaccines, there's preservatives, there's all kinds of stuff in there. It's a witch's brew. And if you're already kind of on the edge, and just backtracking with this patient, he was on the edge, he had exposed himself to gluten, so his body was on fire and his gut was probably compromised, and just backtracking, his liver was probably just handling it. Then all it took was one other little thing, or big thing, and there it was. And there it was. And it's really interesting to note that at this age, I had to struggle so much harder to get him back. And I'd say we got him back 75% this time. Okay, so we're back into more of an Asperger's, can function in college, is actually very brilliant, but the social awkwardness is definitely visible. So, kind of sad. But, at the same sense, was able to come back from it most of the way.